So once the Constitution is written, it has to be ratified by the states. Now, it will not be ratified by the state governments because the whole point of the thing is to take power away from the state governments, and they're not going to willingly agree to that. So they call for special ratifying conventions. It also, they say in the Constitution, only has to be ratified by 9 of the 13 states. Now, if you remember, the Articles of Confederation said you had to have all 13 states agree to any changes. So again, this idea of is the Constitution constitutional? I kind of think it's not. Now, 9 states ratify fairly quickly, but 4 states are outstanding. Rhode Island, of course, because they never were interested in it to begin with. Virginia, who's considering becoming its own independent country. North Carolina, who's, of course, a neighbor of Virginia and is considering staying independent or joining with Virginia if they don't join. And New York, who's also watching what Virginia's going to do. Those who supported the Constitution called themselves Federalists. And the chief among these would be people like George Washington and Ben Franklin, who you see here. Now, Alexander Hamilton, who kind of concocted this scheme to begin with, will launch a scheme to convince his home state of New York to join with the Constitution. And he will get these 3 men here you see on this book cover. John Jay is the first. James Madison has the white hair in the middle, and then Hamilton's the third one here. To write a series of essays explaining the Constitution, how it works, and why it's beneficial. These appear in a number of New York newspapers over the course of some months. There's 88 of them in total. Hamilton writes most of them. Jay only writes a few. Madison writes a couple of dozen or so. And they explain the Constitution at the time it was written from the people who wrote it. So these are extremely valuable to anybody who wants to understand the Constitution. The Supreme Court at times has treated them as if they were part of the Constitution. Anyway, the Anti-Federalist, who get a bad name because they're Federalist means you support a stronger central government, and the Federalists name their opponents Anti-Federalist. In many cases, these are the real revolutionaries, people like Patrick Henry, Samuel Adams, and Thomas Jefferson, who technically might not be an Anti-Federalist, but certainly had serious misgivings about the Constitution. They claimed the Constitution would increase taxes, weaken the state governments, and they fought a revolution they felt so states could govern themselves. And they thought it had the potential to become dictatorial, and that it was a scheme designed to benefit the well-born at the expense of the common man. Jefferson particularly, as well as others, were upset that the Constitution lacked individual liberties protecting the people and wanted a Bill of Rights, which he had written in Virginia, for example. But from the time Delaware joins in June of 1988 to New Hampshire becoming the 9th, Virginia and New York still will not give in and let their misgivings go. And so even though the Constitution technically can be put into effect, it doesn't. Eventually what's going to happen is Madison promises Jefferson that he'll write a Bill of Rights, and Jefferson throws his support behind it. Jefferson is such a respected figure in Virginia that the state of Virginia decides to go along. Once Virginia caves, New York and North Carolina have no more reason to hold out. The Federalist Papers did not convince New York to join. It was Virginia giving in. Rhode Island never joins. In fact, North Carolina never officially joins either. They are essentially forced into the United States against their will, which is ironic because that's what this whole thing was supposed to be being fought about, right? The first president is, of course, there's dates of, you can see the dates that they all adopted. The first president is, of course, George Washington. In fact, the job was created for him. When they debated the job, they talked openly about Washington as the president. He was picked unanimously, but again, this wasn't a popular vote. This was state legislatures picking people to vote. John Adams will be his vice president, the great firebrand from Massachusetts. James Madison will be true to his word and write a Bill of Rights. He'll submit 12 amendments in the very first session of Congress in our history. 10 of them will be adopted, and those 10 amendments are the Bill of Rights. He based this Bill of Rights on the Bill of Rights Jefferson himself had written for Virginia. The judiciary, which had been vaguely defined by the Constitution, is given its shape by the Judiciary Act of 1789, which establishes the Supreme Court and then the federal courts beneath it. The Supreme Court originally had 6 members. Today it has 9. Washington will also create the executive departments. These are the cabinet departments. In the original, this is the entire administration, or at least the heads of the administration. Thomas Jefferson is the Secretary of State. Alexander Hamilton is the Secretary of the Treasury. Henry Knox, one of Washington's favorite Revolutionary War generals, will be the Secretary of War. And the Attorney General will be Edmund Randolph, a Virginia attorney and neighbor of Washington, Madison, and Jefferson.